we know, and we've seen a lot of headlines around the same, right? And you and I think I've probably discussed this offline as well a number of times, and I've certainly discussed it with Paul. I think we've actually mentioned it slightly when one particular, I think, license or two were actually changed a while back. I seem to remember the August edition or August episode of Flash Data Play last year. We did mention that, and we did a bit of coverage around the Red Hat changes. So certainly Red Hat's kind of really caused a lot of concern and sort of antagonism around the the open source community. I think the initial sort of point of contention was around CentOS a few years ago, and then more recently kind of affecting the downstream projects of open source around Red Hat Linux. So they've kind of certainly been in that ring, unfortunately. And then again, more recently, the likes of HashiCorp, where the Terraform license has been changed from, I think, the Mozilla public license, MPL, to the business source license, as it's called, the BSL or BUSL, as it's sometimes called. And again, that's actually caused a lot of contention, actually to the point where the Terraform open source project has been forked. So a new an open source version or a forked version called OpenTF, as it was at the beginning. And then after the Linux Foundation actually adopting the project, they changed their name to OpenTofu. So that was back in September of last year, 2023. What's kind of, and obviously we can mention some other names like Redis and MongoDB, Elastic, Sentry. There's a whole host of those kind of, this growing trend that's happening. Saim, what's kind of your take on this?
Yes, absolutely. I think it's a very interesting topic, and people are trying to ask these questions every day. I think before going to the bed is what gonna happening and why is gonna happening in open source. So those are the very important question to consider and we need to find answer as soon as possible. And I was speaking to last Thursday on the similar topic with the company was actually has some kind of similar situation, but a rather different mindset. That is Buoyant Cloud from the LinkerD. So those who actually know what the LinkerD open source project is, what they did is they actually not actually changing the licensing model, but they actually changing the way the release artifact of the project is actually going into the public. And that is, they actually have two variants of it. One, you actually fork the repo and make a new vendor and make sure these releases is managed vendor that is not a buoyant, or another thing you can do is you can actually go into the third party, or you can actually go into the buoyant, and that they basically give you the LinkerD distribution for the stable releases. The LinkerD variant of the open source, so they doesn't change the open source licensing, but they actually change the way the project is going to be the masses for the production use cases. It's around stable version and the edge releases. For the stable releases, then you need a buoyant link enterprise for LinkerD. So they make this change. And I asked the same question to William, as you actually mentioning, is where is actually open source is heading towards too. And he said that for a long time in the Linux era, we've been able to have some free public contributor who submit their project into the upstream version, and then the community is backing up all the things. But you know that we need some kind of backing it up, like why you are doing this, what is the value out of it. For a small time of things, we can do it for the third party activities or second priority item, but for the longer stable version, to making sure this will be continued project, you need some sort of backing it up model. So that is lacking in the open source as of today now. All the open source maintainers are not much paid off, and that's where the problem arises. And the William is actually mentioning on my podcast, open source is becoming a corporate charity for the bigger organization. You're making some great progress, and the corporate charity picking up those projects and they're running the business out of it.
Right.
But those who are actually contributing to the project is not getting much attention, not paid off, and they feel faded from all these business aspects, and they kind of feel anxiety and depression. And that's a problem in the open source today.
Right, right. Yeah, and I mean, again, there was I picked up on something called the functional source license, or the FSL, which some people have actually, adopted. So that's described as the evolution of BSL, which was the business source license. And then the description that I got was, it said, deepens the commitment to balancing user freedom and developer sustainability. It's seen as a compelling option for open source minded SaaS companies who wish to grant freedom without harmful free riding. So I guess it's kind of, in order to get to a particular point where, the company needs to, it's a little bit of a chicken and egg, where you're kind of trying to, you want to provide the open source, but in order to do that, you need to attract the community, developers, coders, and so on to maintain the project and keep it going. And obviously, hopefully make some revenue out of an enterprise version, let's say, of that project, right? Which is fun. I think everybody's kind of accepted that. But that's kind of a hard cycle to maybe maintain. So I can appreciate some of that, but obviously for the kind of the purest of, people are kind of very purist about open source. They see this as a negative, definitely, and they kind of, as soon as something like that happens, they move away, they fork the project, they try and go off and do something different.
Yes, absolutely. And I think what is you currently noticing, and everybody is noticing, what happening is, like, we do not want any company to own the open source side of a thing. So what ended up happening is like, whenever you change the licenses, that is basically you wanting to change the philosophy of that open source project. You wanted to make sure somebody is using the project, is giving you something back, and that when something is actually you receiving, is you actually use this investment to making sure this project is smooth running, and for the next 5 to 10 years, it will stay as it is.
Yeah.
And what happening is, like, this is the philosophy you want to change. But you are the only one who are thinking on these lines.
Yeah.
But the rest of the ecosystem is not adopt to your philosophy. So they see as a negative. So what ended up happening is that the foundation or some of the bigger organization is usually look up the project, and they're not happy the way this project changing the license. They go into the foundation, they fork the repo, and they announce it to the public that we are actually using this project as an open source with these licenses, with this new name. And that's where this conversation is end, mostly.
Yeah.
You don't know what's happened there, what's happening not there. So when people thinking about the one company did change the license, how do, as human, we trust that the next company will not do the same thing? So that is the question. And I think it's a very, very generous question to ask.
Yeah, I agree. And I think it's going to be an interesting thing to see how many more these types of vendors really kind of start adopting some of these alternative, licensing models, and whether there is actually something, that can be done in order to, to kind of, stop that movement or not. I don't think there is. I mean, if they're kind of the owners of that particular project, and sure, okay, that might be a, CNCF project or something, but if it's, something that they're kind of driving forward by themselves, then I don't know if that's going to be possible, really. I mean, the likes of sort of Terraform and so on have kind of been part of the landscape, but they're clearly still owned by HashiCorp and so on. So if they control the project, then I guess it's up to them. So I can appreciate the difficulty, and it's excruciating to kind of wanting to maintain the project and see it not just survive, but actually thrive as well, right? To do well, in other words, while still kind of trying to, maintain that sort of open source sort of effect, if you like, on it as well. So, I mean, I guess for the purists, as we said, at the end of the day, it's not open source, and that is dangerous. That's the kind of the unprecedented sort of foggy path, if you like, that some of these vendors that have decided to change their license, they've decided to kind of go down that particular path. Thank you for watching. Please don't forget to subscribe to the channel to support me. You may also want to check out some of the other videos on this channel. Bye for now.